Learning is continuous. It is a process that we go through in life even after going to school. Whether it be for additional knowledge or a skill we need to learn, learning techniques are needed to master tough subjects effectively and efficiently. When I was in high school, I struggled in subjects like algebra and physics. The abstract ideas we study in most math and science subjects are hard to master, unlike those that usually involves concrete ideas that we can easily observe using our senses. As I entered college to pursue an engineering degree, algebra and physics became inevitable, mainly because algebra is a skill needed as foundation for mathematical computations, and physics is the core of engineering. In this video, I will share some tips that I use to master these subjects and I'm still using to learn new knowledge and skills now that I am already a professional. The first step is always the hardest part. When we need to do something that's rather challenging, an unhappy feeling associated with pain pushes us to shift our attention to a more pleasant activity, which eventually vanishes once we realize the challenging task that needs to be done. We call this procrastination. It then takes us into the zombie mode or the semi-aware mode of delaying the accomplishment of an important task. Oftentimes, procrastination leads to cramming, which reduces the effectiveness of the process since time is essential in learning. Surprisingly, we can use the zombie mode to override the habit of procrastination. To do this, we need to change how we react to the cues of procrastination, putting our negative thoughts aside and focusing on the process of doing and not on the product or outcome we want to accomplish. By using willpower to change the reaction to the cues, the routine part, or the zombie mode, takes over. But this time, we are in the process of doing the task. We have rewired our bad habit of procrastination into a habit of getting the job done. Eventually, the reward of doing the process and the belief that our new system works have solved the problem of procrastination. In relation to the essentiality of time in learning, let us now discuss the thinking modes that are useful in learning effectively. Researchers have found that there are two types of thinking mode necessary in the process of learning: the diffuse mode and the focused mode of learning, both of which are equally important. We are more familiar with the focused mode. That simply means the concentrated type of thinking that we use when we are doing a more familiar task. Let us use the analogy of a pinball machine. Think of the focus mode as a pinball machine with rubber balls spaced very closely. The green pattern shown represents a familiar thought pattern. An example would be solving a mathematical problem. You think of it, the thought takes off, bouncing around on the bumpers. You are then able to figure out how to solve the problem. It is passing through the pattern smoothly. You think strong in a single area. But what if the problem you're working on involves new ideas and approaches you've never thought of before, as shown by the orange pattern below the pinball machine? How are you going to develop that new thought? Aside from being an unfamiliar thought, the closely spaced rubber bumpers also block your access to this new idea. To get to this new thought pattern, we need the other type of thinking, the diffuse mode, as represented by this pinball machine with rubber bumpers relatively spaced widely. As the thought takes off, look at how freely it can bounce around rubber bumpers, making it easier to access other areas of the pinball machine. In this diffuse mode of thinking, we think light but in a broad point of view. Both metaphor and analogy are powerful tools to use when learning in the diffuse mode. Notice how we use the analogy of the pinball machine to learn about the focused and diffuse mode. As far as neuroscientists' current knowledge is concerned, we can only be either in the focus mode or diffuse mode of thinking. Like a coin on top of the table, you can only see one side or the other side. We are only able to access one mode at a time, and not two thinking modes at the same time. To be able to learn something that is more difficult, your mind should be able to go back and forth between the two types of thinking. This is like the Pomodoro technique. 25 minutes of focus mode on a single task, 5 minutes of diffuse mode. According to legend, the famous inventor Thomas Edison shifts back and forth between the focus and diffuse mode of thinking when trying to figure out something new. Let's now take a look at chunking. Chunks are compact packages of information. It can also be defined as mental leaps that unite scattered bits of information through learning. But how do we form a chunk? First step is to focus. We need our undivided attention when forming a chunk. The next step is to understand the underlying principles or basic ideas. Mastering the basics not just helps us understand the more complex parts, but it also makes the chunk we are forming useful. Creating a chunk without understanding is useless. Lastly, in forming a chunk, we need to practice. Being able to do it yourself through testing is one way to guarantee that we have truly learned something. It helps us transfer information from our working memory, also known as short-term memory, to our long-term memory. Recalling and practicing gives us a deeper learning as compared to only reading a material that you did not do. When we do not test ourselves, this might give us illusions that we are competent in that specific area. I realize that not practicing through testing is what hindered me from mastering algebra and physics in high school. Aside from forming a chunk, gaining context on how and when to use a specific chunk of information and to connect it to other chunks in different topics is one way of cementing ideas in our long-term memory and form neural synapses. I have been implicitly using these techniques when I was studying in college. The importance of understanding the basics and testing myself has been an integral part of my learning process. Aside from this, the importance of sleep and exercise must not be taken for granted. Exhausting ourselves over a topic without taking rest only stresses us out and eventually losing our ability to absorb information in a positive feedback loop. Lastly, listening to music and surrounding yourself with creative people can also enhance your own creativity, furthering your learning. We can continue to improve and mix the different tips and techniques that we'll discuss. After all, we are all unique. I hope that you continue to dream and learn as we move forward in life.